The night settles slowly over Cairo, not as a sudden darkness, but as a soft dimming of edges, as though the day itself were gently folding away into silence. The warmth of the stone lingers for a while, releasing the memory of the sun in quiet breath that rise from rooftops and narrow streets. Lamps begin to glow behind wooden lattice windows, their light softened by carved patterns that scatter gold across interior walls. Somewhere in the distance, footsteps pass and fade, unhurried, as if the city itself is growing tired in a calm and familiar way. Above it all, the sky stretches wide and open, untouched by the concerns below, holding its place with a kind of patient stillness. And if you listen carefully, there is a sense that the night is not empty, but gently full, like a room where something has just been placed down and left undisturbed. Tonight, we will walk slowly through this city, not as visitors in haste, but as quiet observers, moving at the pace of breath and shadow. We will climb, step by careful step, toward a rooftop where the air feels slightly cooler, where the sounds of the street soften into a distant murmur. There is no urgency here, no need to arrive quickly, only the steady rhythm of ascent and the quiet awareness of each movement. The stone beneath the feet is worn smooth from years of passage, and it carries with it the memory of countless others who have walked the same path. As we rise, the horizon opens gently, revealing more of the sky, each step offering a little more space, a little more quiet. And somewhere above, already waiting, there is a single point of light that has not yet asked to be noticed. The rooftop itself is simple, edged with low walls that hold back the drop to the streets below, and marked by the presence of objects that have remained in place for many years. A wooden stand supports instruments of brass and carefully shaped metal, their surfaces dulled by time but still precise in their purpose. Nearby, a small table holds sheets of parchment, their edges slightly curled, weighted gently by a smooth stone to keep them from shifting in the night air. A clay lamp burns with a steady flame, its light neither bright nor dim, but constant, as though it has learned to exist without drawing attention to itself. The air carries the faint scent of dust and ink, mixed with something cooler, something that seems to belong more to the sky than to the earth. And in this quiet arrangement, nothing appears out of place. Nothing calls for change. Everything rests as it has for many nights before. Here, a man sits, not in stillness alone, but in a kind of practiced quiet that comes from long familiarity with both the place and the task. His clothing is simple and layered, chosen more for comfort than display, the fabric worn soft at the edges from repeated use. His hands move slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of care, as he adjusts the position of an instrument and then pauses, allowing it to settle. There is no rush in his movements, no sense of time pressing forward, only the continuation of a routine that has been repeated so many times it no longer feels like effort. He breathes evenly, the rhythm of his body aligned with the calm of the night around him. And when he lifts his gaze, it is not with curiosity or surprise, but with recognition, as though he is greeting something already known. Above him, the sky reveals itself gradually, as the last traces of dusk fade into a deeper shade that allows the stars to appear one by one. They do not arrive all at once, but in a slow and patient unfolding, each light taking its place without interruption. Some shine faintly, almost hesitant, while others hold a steadier brightness, though none demand attention. The patterns they form are not immediately clear, and perhaps they are not meant to be, existing instead as a quiet arrangement that rewards those who look without expectation. Among them, there is one star that rests in a particular position, neither the brightest nor the faintest, but consistent in a way that feels gentle rather than imposing. It does not flicker more than the others, nor does it shift in any noticeable way, and yet it seems to carry a quiet presence that draws the eye back to it. And so the man watches, not searching, but simply allowing his gaze to return again and again. He reaches for the parchment with a measured motion, dipping the tip of his pen into ink that has been prepared earlier in the day, its surface still and undisturbed. The act of writing is slow, each mark placed with care, as though the movement itself is as important as the record it creates. Lines form gradually, small notations that correspond to what he sees above, though the meaning of them is not spoken aloud. The sound of the pen against the surface is soft, almost imperceptible, blending with the quiet of the night rather than interrupting it. Once a line is complete, he pauses, allowing the ink to settle, giving the moment space before continuing. And in this repetition, there is a sense of time, stretching gently, not measured in minutes, but in actions that return again and again. If your eyes feel a little heavy now, that is perfectly all right, because this is not a story that asks you to hold tightly to every detail. It is enough to drift with the rhythm of the night, to follow the slow movements of hand and gaze without needing to remember each one. The city below continues its quiet fading, doors closing, voices lowering, until even those sounds become part of the background stillness. The lamp beside the man burns in the same steady way, its flame unchanged, casting a soft circle of light that does not reach far beyond its edge. The air remains cool and even, carrying no sudden changes, only the gentle consistency of night settling deeper. And above, the stars continue their silent presence, unchanged in their quiet arrangement. The man adjusts his position slightly, not out of discomfort, but as part of the natural flow of sitting for long periods in one place. His gaze returns once more to the same point in the sky, the same star that has held its place across many nights like this one. There is no need to question it, no urgency to understand it, only the quiet act of noticing and recording. His work is not driven by discovery in the way that others might imagine, but by continuity, by the steady accumulation of observations that build slowly over time. Each night adds a small layer, barely perceptible on its own, yet meaningful in its persistence. And so he continues, not seeking an end, but participating in something that feels without end. Beyond the rooftop, the city rests more fully now, its movements reduced to the occasional sound that drifts and then disappears. The sky, in contrast, feels expansive and unchanged, a quiet constant above the shifting patterns of life below. The man remains seated, his presence as steady as the lamp beside him, both of them small points of light in a larger darkness. There is a sense that nothing needs to happen, that the night is complete as it is, without the need for interruption or event. And in that completeness, the act of watching becomes enough, not as a means to something else, but as something whole in itself. The star remains where it has always been, and the man continues to observe, the two connected by nothing more than attention. As the hours pass, though they are not counted in any hurried way, the rhythm of the scene remains unchanged, like a quiet pattern that repeats without effort. The ink dries, the parchment fills slowly, and the instruments rest between small adjustments that are made without urgency. The air cools just slightly more, enough to be noticed, but not enough to disturb, and the lamp continues its steady glow. If you are still here, listening, you may feel the softness of this moment settling around you, like a gentle weight that asks nothing in return. There is no need to hold on to every image, no need to follow every movement with precision. Just as the man watches the sky without strain, you may simply rest, allowing the night to continue as it has always done. And so the scene remains, quiet and unbroken. A rooftop above Cairo, a man seated beside a lamp, and a single star held gently in his gaze. Nothing shifts in any dramatic way. Nothing calls for attention beyond what is already given. The city sleeps, the sky endures, and the act of watching continues without interruption. The candle burns low and steady. The room, though open to the night, feels enclosed in calm. And somewhere within this stillness the story begins, not with a change, but with the quiet persistence of something that has always been there. Capítulo 2. Cairo, in the centuries when its streets were shaped more by footsteps than by wheels, carried a rhythm that moved neither quickly nor slowly, but with a kind of steady continuity that seemed to belong equally to its people and to its stones. The city rose in layers of earth-toned walls and narrow passages, each one holding the warmth of the day long after the sun had lowered itself beyond the horizon. Dust rested lightly on every surface, not as neglect, but as a quiet companion to daily life, settling and lifting again with each passing movement. Lamps were lit one by one as evening approached, their glow spreading softly through windows and doorways, creating small islands of light within the gathering dark. Voices drifted through the air in low tones, never entirely absent, yet never overwhelming, as if the city preferred to speak in murmurs. And above all of this, unseen but always present, the sky waited with patient stillness, unchanged by the slow turning of human routines. In the markets, which during the day were filled with the careful arrangement of goods and the gentle negotiation of trade, the evening brought a gradual quieting, rather than an abrupt end. Merchants covered their wares with cloth, folding fabric with practiced hands, while the scent of spices lingered in the air, refusing to fade quickly. Dates, figs, and grains remained in memory even as they were stored away, their textures and colors carried forward into the next day without interruption. The ground beneath the stalls bore the marks of countless footsteps, worn smooth in some places and uneven in others, creating a surface that felt familiar to those who walked it daily. Even as activity lessened, there was no sense of absence, only a soft transition from one state to another. And in this gentle shift, the city revealed a patience that did not depend on any single moment, but on the quiet accumulation of many. Water moved through the city in channels and carried jars, its presence both ordinary and essential, shaping the pace of daily life without drawing attention to itself. At the banks of the Nile, figures could still be seen in the late hours, their movements slow and deliberate as they completed tasks that did not require the brightness of day. The river itself reflected the dim light of the sky, its surface broken only by small ripples that caught and released the faint glow above. Boats rested near the shore, tied loosely, allowing them to shift slightly with the current, as though breathing in time with the water. The air near the river held a different coolness, one that contrasted gently with the warmth of the inner streets. And as always, the presence of the river remained constant, a quiet thread woven through the life of the city. Homes in Cairo were built with an understanding of both heat and shadow, their interiors designed to hold coolness even when the sun stood high. Courtyards opened inward, creating spaces where light could enter without overwhelming, and where the air could move in slow, measured currents. Wooden screens filtered sunlight during the day and softened lamplight at night, casting patterns that shifted gently across walls and floors. Within these spaces, families moved through familiar routines, preparing meals, sharing quiet conversation, and eventually settling into rest. The sounds of these activities did not travel far, contained within the structure of the home, blending into the broader hush of the city. Even in these private spaces, there was a sense of continuity, of actions repeated not out of necessity alone, but out of a kind of inherited rhythm. And as the night deepened, these homes became still, holding their quiet like vessels filled to the brim. Scholars and students, scattered throughout the city, followed patterns of study that extended beyond the daylight hours, guided by the steady glow of oil lamps and the patience required for careful reading. Manuscripts rested on low desks, their pages turned slowly, each line absorbed without haste, as though knowledge itself required time to settle. Ink was prepared with attention, mixed and tested until it reached the right consistency, then applied with a steady hand that did not rush its task. Conversations between teachers and students unfolded in measured tones, allowing space between words, giving each idea time to be understood. There was no urgency in their pursuit, only a quiet dedication that mirrored the steady pace of the city around them. And in these rooms, where thought moved as gently as breath, the night became a companion rather than an obstacle. If your thoughts begin to drift here, that is entirely natural, because the city itself seems to invite a kind of gentle wandering. The repetition of its patterns, the softness of its sounds, and the evenness of its pace create a space where attention can loosen without being lost. There is no single point that demands focus, no moment that insists on being held tightly. only a continuous unfolding of small and quiet details. The lamps continue to burn in their steady way, their light unchanged by the passing of hours. The air remains calm, carrying with it the faint traces of dust and distant voices that never quite disappear. And within this calm, it becomes easy to follow the rhythm without effort, allowing the mind to settle into the same stillness that surrounds the city. Above these homes and streets, rising slightly apart yet still connected to everything below, are the rooftops, where the air feels more open and the sky more immediate. These spaces are neither fully part of the street nor entirely removed from it, existing in a quiet balance between the two. From here, the sounds of the city reach upward in softened form, losing their edges as they travel through the open air. Objects left on these rooftops carry the marks of time, touched by sun and wind, yet remaining in place through long periods of stillness. It is here that some choose to sit in the evening, not for any particular purpose, but simply to be present in a space that offers both distance and connection. And it is here, too, that the act of looking upward becomes easier, as the sky unfolds without obstruction. The sky over Cairo does not belong to the city, and yet it feels inseparable from it, a constant presence that frames every movement below. Its colors shift slowly as night deepens, moving from soft blue to a darker shade that allows the stars to emerge with quiet clarity. These stars do not announce themselves, but appear gradually, as though stepping forward one at a time, each finding its place without disturbing the others. The patterns they form are subtle, requiring patience to notice, and even then, they remain open to interpretation. There is no single way to understand them, no fixed meaning that must be grasped, only the experience of observing them over time. And in this observation, a kind of quiet relationship forms, one that does not demand explanation. In this city of lamps and dust, where every surface carries the memory of what has come before, the passage of time is not marked by sudden change, but by the slow layering of moments that settle gently into one another. Days give way to nights, and nights return to days, without interruption or urgency, creating a rhythm that feels both endless and complete. The people who move through these cycles do so with an awareness that is more felt than spoken, a sense that life unfolds best when allowed to follow its natural pace. Even the smallest actions, repeated over years, take on a quiet significance, becoming part of a larger pattern that cannot be easily seen all at once. And above it all, the sky remains unchanged in its presence, offering the same quiet invitation night after night. Somewhere within this setting, though not yet fully revealed, a life is unfolding that will come to rest upon this very rhythm, shaped by its steadiness and guided by its calm. The rooftop, the lamp, the parchment, and the sky will all become part of a single continuous act, repeated so often that it feels as natural as breathing. There is no need to hurry toward it, no need to anticipate what has not yet been shown, because the city itself is enough for now. Its quiet streets, its patient walls, and its softly glowing lights create a foundation upon which the rest of the story will gently rise. And as the night continues, unchanged and unhurried, the sense of something enduring begins to take shape, as subtle and steady as the stars above. Capítulo 3. He wakes before the first light has fully reached the walls of the city, not because he is required to, but because his body has learned this hour through years of repetition. The air at this time carries a coolness that lingers briefly before the day begins to warm the stone, and he sits for a moment in stillness before rising. His room is modest, arranged with care rather than decoration, containing only what is needed for a life of quiet study and routine. A folded garment rests near his sleeping place, and he dresses slowly, adjusting each layer with deliberate attention. There is no haste in his movements, only a steady progression from one action to the next, as though time itself were unfolding gently around him. Outside, the city is not yet awake, and the silence feels complete, like a page that has not yet been written upon. His morning begins with simple tasks that require little thought but reward patience, each one performed in the same order each day. Water is poured into a small basin, its surface disturbed only briefly before settling again into stillness. He washes his hands and face with slow, careful motions, feeling the coolness against his skin as a quiet way of waking fully into the day. A small portion of bread and dates is prepared, not arranged for display, but placed with a kind of quiet familiarity that comes from repetition. He eats without distraction, seated near a low surface where light begins to gather as the sun rises. There are no elaborate meals, no variations that break the rhythm, only nourishment that supports the steady continuation of his work. And as he finishes, he takes a moment to sit without movement, allowing the morning to settle around him before beginning the next part of his day. His clothing reflects the same balance between simplicity and purpose, made from fabrics that have softened over time and shaped themselves to his movements. The colors are muted, chosen not to stand out, but to remain in harmony with the tones of the city around him. A loose outer garment falls naturally over his shoulders, allowing for ease of motion as he moves between spaces throughout the day. The edges of the fabric show signs of wear, not as damage, but as evidence of long use, each thread holding the memory of repeated days. He adjusts it with a practiced motion, ensuring that it sits comfortably, neither too tight nor too loose. There is no ornamentation, no detail that calls attention to itself, only a quiet completeness in the way he presents himself. And once dressed, he steps into the day as though continuing a process that never truly pauses. The path he walks each morning is familiar, shaped by countless repetitions that have worn the ground into a gentle guide beneath his feet. He moves through narrow streets where the light filters slowly, touching walls and doorways in a gradual spread that reveals the city piece by piece. Others begin to appear as the morning progresses, their movements blending into a shared rhythm that requires no coordination. He acknowledges them with small gestures, a slight inclination of the head or a quiet greeting, never lingering long in conversation. His purpose is not separate from the city, but it is also not entirely part of it, existing in a space that allows both connection and distance. The sounds of the morning grow gradually, never abrupt, always unfolding in a way that feels expected. And through it all, he continues at the same steady pace, neither ahead nor behind, simply present. By the time he reaches the place where he keeps his instruments and materials, the sun has risen enough to illuminate the surfaces with a soft and even light. The room is arranged with care, each object placed not for display, but for ease of use, allowing him to move without interruption from one task to another. Shelves hold rolled parchments and bound texts, their edges marked by time, yet preserved with quiet attention. Instruments rest on wooden stands, their forms precise and measured, designed to capture the movements of the sky with careful accuracy. He moves among them with familiarity, touching each one lightly as though confirming its presence before beginning his work. There is no need to examine them closely each day, as their condition is maintained through consistent care, rather than sudden inspection. And in this space, the outside world feels distant, replaced by the quiet focus of observation and record. His work during the day is not always directed toward the sky, but toward the preparation that allows the night to be understood with greater clarity. He reviews previous notes, tracing lines of ink that have been placed over many years, each one a small record of a moment that has passed. The writing is steady, not ornate, designed for clarity rather than decoration, allowing patterns to emerge slowly through repetition. He pauses often, not out of uncertainty, but to allow the information to settle, to be held in the mind without strain. When adjustments are needed, they are made carefully, without erasing what has come before, but adding to it in a way that preserves continuity. There is a respect for the accumulation of knowledge, not as something to be rushed, but as something that grows naturally over time. And as the day progresses, his work unfolds in this same measured way, without interruption or urgency. If your thoughts begin to soften here, it is because his routine carries a quiet consistency that does not demand attention, but gently holds it. The repetition of actions, the evenness of movement, and the absence of sudden change create a rhythm that mirrors the steady passage of time itself. There is no single moment that stands apart, No event that requires a shift in pace, only the continuation of a pattern that has been established over many years. Even the light in the room changes gradually, moving across surfaces in a way that can be observed without effort. The sounds from outside drift in and out, never breaking the calm, only adding to the sense of place. And within this environment, it becomes easy to follow his day without needing to anticipate what comes next. As the afternoon begins to soften, he prepares for the part of his work that takes place under the open sky, gathering what he will need for the night ahead. The instruments are checked with a light touch, not for faults, but as a continuation of the care they receive each day. Parchment is selected and placed carefully, ensuring that it is ready to receive new observations without interruption. Ink is prepared again, its surface smooth and undisturbed, reflecting the same attention given in the morning. He moves without haste, allowing each preparation to be completed fully before beginning the next. There is no sense of anticipation, only a quiet readiness that comes from knowing the rhythm of what is to come. And as the light outside begins to lower, he carries these materials with him toward the rooftop where the night will unfold. The transition from day to evening is not marked by a single moment, but by a gradual shift that touches every part of the city and his routine alike. The warmth of the sun begins to fade from the stone, replaced by a cooler air that moves gently through open spaces. Shadows lengthen and soften, losing their sharp edges as the light diminishes. He takes his place on the rooftop as he has done many times before, arranging his tools with the same care that defines every part of his day. The lamp is lit, its flame steady and controlled, offering just enough light to continue his work without disturbing the darkness around him. And as he settles into position, there is a sense that nothing new is beginning, but that something ongoing is simply continuing. When he lifts his gaze to the sky, it is not with expectation, but with familiarity, as though he is returning to a conversation that has been paused rather than ended. The stars begin to appear in their slow and patient way, each one taking its place without interruption. Among them, the patterns he has come to know reveal themselves gradually, not demanding recognition, but allowing it. His attention moves across them in a measured way, not searching, but acknowledging what is already known. The instruments beside him remain ready, their presence a quiet support rather than a focus. And as he begins once more to observe and record, the day dissolves fully into night, leaving only the steady act of watching that defines his life. Capítulo 4. The rooftop where he works does not rise as a grand structure set apart from the city, but rather as a natural extension of it, shaped by the same materials and softened by the same passage of time. Its surface is made of worn stone, smoothed by years of quiet use, holding within it the warmth of many days and the coolness of many nights. Low walls frame the edges, offering a gentle boundary without fully enclosing the space, allowing the air to move freely across it. There is no decoration here, no ornament placed for admiration, only the quiet presence of objects that serve a purpose. The sky above feels closer in this place, not because it has changed, but because there is less between it and the eye. And in this openness, the rooftop becomes something more than part of the building, becoming a place where attention can settle without distraction. Near the center of the space stands a wooden platform, carefully constructed and maintained, its surface level and steady despite the subtle unevenness of the stone beneath it. Upon this platform rest the instruments that have accompanied the astronomer through many years of observation, each one shaped with precision and handled with care. Brass arcs catch the faint light of the lamp, their curves reflecting a soft glow that shifts gently as the flame moves. Fine markings have been etched into their surfaces, not as decoration, but as guides, allowing measurements to be taken with quiet accuracy. The wood that supports them shows signs of age, small variations in color and texture that speak of long use rather than neglect. Nothing here feels new, yet nothing feels worn beyond use, existing instead in a balanced state of quiet endurance. And as the night settles in, these instruments remain still, waiting to be touched into motion. Beside the platform, a low table holds the materials needed for recording, arranged in a way that suggests familiarity rather than strict order. Sheets of parchment are stacked with care, their edges slightly curled, their surfaces smooth and ready to receive ink. A small container holds the ink itself, dark and still, reflecting the light of the lamp in a faint, shifting line. Pens rest nearby, their tips carefully shaped, each one prepared for a specific kind of mark, though their differences are subtle. A smooth stone sits at the corner of the table, placed there not for decoration, but to keep the parchment from moving when the air passes across the rooftop. These objects do not draw attention to themselves, yet they form an essential part of the work that takes place here. And in their quiet arrangement, they contribute to the sense that everything has its place, even if that place is not immediately obvious. The lamp, placed slightly to one side, burns with a steady flame that neither flickers excessively nor dims, offering a consistent light that does not interfere with the darkness beyond its reach. Its clay surface is simple, shaped by hands that understood both function and restraint, allowing it to serve its purpose without distraction. The oil within it is replenished regularly, ensuring that the flame remains even throughout the hours of observation. The light it casts does not extend far, creating a small circle of visibility that fades gently into the surrounding night. Within this circle, movements can be made with ease, while beyond it, the sky remains uninterrupted and clear. The balance between light and darkness is carefully maintained, not through adjustment, but through understanding. And in this balance, the rooftop becomes a place where both can exist without conflict. The walls that border the rooftop are low enough to allow an uninterrupted view of the horizon, yet high enough to provide a sense of quiet enclosure. Their surfaces are rough to the touch, shaped by the same processes that form the rest of the building, holding the marks of time in subtle variations. In some places, the stone has worn smoother, where hands have rested, or where movement has passed close by. In others, it remains slightly uneven, catching the light in small, irregular patterns that shift as the lamp moves. These walls do not separate the astronomer from the city, but rather soften the transition between the space of observation and the world below. Sounds rise gently over them, arriving in softened forms that do not disturb the stillness. And as he sits within this space, the walls serve not as barriers, but as quiet companions to the work being done. If your thoughts begin to drift here, it is because this place does not demand focus, but instead allows it to settle naturally, without effort. The repetition of objects, the steadiness of their arrangement, and the absence of sudden change create an environment where attention can rest lightly. There is nothing here that requires immediate understanding, no element that insists on being examined closely. The instruments, the table, the lamp, and the walls all exist in a quiet harmony that does not call attention to itself. Even the air moves gently, carrying with it only the faintest shifts in temperature and scent. And within this calm, it becomes easy to remain, without needing to move forward or look elsewhere. At the edge of the rooftop, where the view opens slightly wider, the city reveals itself in soft outlines, rather than sharp detail. The shapes of buildings blend into one another, their edges softened by distance and the dimness of the night. Occasional points of light appear in the distance, marking places where others remain awake, though their presence feels distant and unobtrusive. The sounds that rise from below are faint and irregular, never forming a pattern that demands attention. From this vantage, the city feels both present and removed, a quiet background to the work taking place above. The astronomer does not turn often to look at it, not out of disinterest, but because his focus lies elsewhere. And yet, it remains a part of the scene, a reminder of the world that continues beyond the boundaries of the rooftop. Above, the sky extends without interruption, its depth becoming more apparent as the night deepens and the stars take their places. The absence of obstruction allows the patterns to be seen more clearly, though they still require patience to be understood. Each star holds its position with a quiet steadiness, contributing to a larger arrangement that unfolds gradually over time. There is no single point that dominates the view, no feature that draws attention away from the whole. Instead, The sky presents itself as a continuous field, inviting observation without demanding it. The astronomer lifts his gaze into this space with familiarity, not seeking something new, but returning to what he has seen many times before. And in this act of looking, the rooftop and the sky become connected, forming a single, uninterrupted field of attention. The instruments, when brought into use, move with a quiet precision that reflects the care with which they have been made and maintained. A slight adjustment of a brass arc, a gentle alignment of a sighting edge, each motion is performed without haste, allowing the instrument to settle into its new position before the next movement is made. The sounds they produce are minimal, a soft contact here, a faint shift there, never breaking the stillness of the night. The astronomer's hands guide them with familiarity, requiring no force, only a steady touch that has been refined through years of practice. Once aligned, they remain still, holding their position as though becoming part of the structure around them. And in this stillness, they fulfill their purpose, not through movement, but through their ability to remain precisely where they are placed. As the hours pass, though they are not measured in any hurried way, the rooftop maintains its quiet balance, unchanged in its arrangement and steady in its presence. The lamp continues to burn with the same even flame. The parchment gradually fills with lines of ink, and the instruments rest between moments of use. The air cools slightly, carrying with it a sense of depth that belongs only to the later hours of the night. If you are still here, listening, you may feel the weight of this stillness settling gently, not as something heavy, but as something grounding. There is no need to follow every detail, no need to hold on to each description, only to remain within the calm that the place offers. And as the astronomer continues his work, the rooftop remains, as it has always been, a quiet space above the city, where observation unfolds without interruption. Capítulo 5. The act begins without announcement, as many enduring things do, with a small decision that does not appear to carry weight at the time it is made. Among the many points of light that appear each night, the astronomer allows his attention to return, again and again, to one that rests in a familiar place. It is not the brightest star, nor the faintest, and it does not distinguish itself through any sudden movement or change. Instead, it holds a quiet consistency, a presence that feels reliable without asking to be understood. He notices it first as part of a broader pattern, a point among many, yet something in its steadiness invites a longer pause. And so, without ceremony, he marks its position on the parchment, placing a small line of ink that will be joined by many more. The ledger in which he records his observations is not a single-bound volume, but a collection of pages that grow gradually over time, each one carrying its share of quiet marks. The parchment has a texture that responds gently to the movement of the pen, offering just enough resistance to guide each stroke. He does not write quickly, allowing each line to form with care, ensuring that it reflects what he sees, without distortion. The star is noted in relation to others, its position described through measured distances and angles that align with the instruments beside him. There is no flourish in the writing, no attempt to make it more than it needs to be, only a steady recording of what is present. Once the mark is made, he pauses, not to admire it, but to allow it to settle into the page as part of a growing pattern. And then, with the same calm, he continues. Night after night, the process repeats with a consistency that becomes almost imperceptible, blending into the rhythm of his life in the same way as breath or step. The star remains where it has been, returning to its place with a reliability that requires no confirmation. Yet he confirms it all the same. Each observation is recorded with the same care, the same measured motion, as though the act itself holds as much importance as the result. The parchment begins to fill, not densely, but gradually, leaving space between entries that reflects the passage of time. There is no sense of urgency in this accumulation, no need to complete the page quickly, only the quiet continuation of a process that has no defined end. And in this repetition, the star becomes more than a point of light, becoming instead a reference that anchors his observations. The instruments assist in this work, offering a framework through which the position of the star can be understood with greater clarity. He aligns them with slow, deliberate movements, adjusting their angles until they rest in a position that feels correct, guided by both measurement and familiarity. The metal surfaces respond to his touch with a quiet steadiness, holding their alignment once set, allowing him to focus on the act of observation itself. Through these tools, the star is not only seen, but placed within a system that connects it to the wider sky. Yet even with this structure, there is a sense that the star exists beyond the lines and marks that attempt to describe it. The instruments do not capture the star, but offer a way to approach it, to understand its place, without altering its. And so he uses them, not as a means of control, but as a companion to his attention. If your thoughts begin to drift here, it is because this process does not demand intensity, but invites a gentle awareness that can rise and fall without consequence. The repetition of the same action, the return to the same point in the sky, creates a rhythm that soothes rather than stimulates. There is no need to remember each observation, no need to follow the exact placement of every line on the page. It is enough to sense the continuity, the steady accumulation of small moments that build quietly over time. The lamp beside him continues to burn with the same even flame, unchanged by the passing hours. The air remains calm, carrying only the faintest movements that do not disturb the stillness. And within this setting, the act of watching becomes something that can be shared, even in silence. As the seasons shift, though they do so gradually, the position of the stars changes in ways that require patience to notice, and the astronomer adjusts his records accordingly. Yet the star he has chosen remains consistent within its own pattern, returning to its place with a reliability that feels almost reassuring. He does not question this consistency, nor does he seek to explain it in any immediate way, allowing it instead to exist as it is. His notes reflect this approach, capturing the position without adding interpretation, leaving space for understanding to emerge over time. The pages of the ledger grow, each one holding a small fragment of the sky, preserved through careful observation. There is no moment when the work feels complete, only a continuation that extends beyond any single night. And in this extension, the star remains a quiet constant. Occasionally, his gaze moves beyond the star, tracing the patterns that surround it, acknowledging the wider field in which it exists. These moments do not distract from his focus, but rather deepen it, placing the star within a broader context that gives it meaning. He records these surrounding points as well, though with less frequency, allowing them to form a subtle frame around the central observation. The relationships between these stars are noted with the same care, though they do not hold his attention in the same sustained way. There is a balance in this approach, a recognition that no single point exists in isolation, even as one becomes the center of his work. And through this balance, the ledger becomes not just a record of one star, but a reflection of the sky as a whole, seen through a particular lens. The passage of time is marked not by dates written in bold, but by the gradual filling of pages, the accumulation of ink that speaks quietly of many nights spent in observation. Each page carries with it the memory of the conditions under which it was written, the temperature of the air, the steadiness of the lamp, the clarity of the sky. These details are not always recorded explicitly, yet they exist within the marks themselves, shaping them in subtle ways. The astronomer does not revisit each page often, but when he does, there is a sense of continuity that connects the present moment to those that have passed. The star appears again and again, its position slightly adjusted as needed, yet always recognizable within the pattern. And in this repetition, a quiet narrative begins to form, one that unfolds without the need for words. As the night deepens and the hours pass without urgency, the act of recording continues in the same measured way, each entry placed with care and allowed to settle before the next begins. The space around him remains unchanged, the rooftop holding its quiet balance between the city below and the sky above. The instruments rest when not in use, their presence steady and unobtrusive, ready to assist when needed. The lamp continues to burn, its light unchanged, creating a small circle of clarity within the surrounding darkness. If you are still here, listening, you may feel the repetition of this process becoming familiar, almost expected, like a gentle rhythm that continues without interruption. And as the astronomer places another line of ink upon the page, the star remains where it has always been, held quietly within both the sky and the ledger that records it. Capítulo 6. Time, in the life of the astronomer, does not pass in sharp divisions or marked transitions, but instead gathers quietly, like fine grains of sand settling into place without sound. The days follow one another with such consistency that they begin to feel less like separate units, and more like a single, continuous flow. Morning becomes afternoon, afternoon becomes evening, and evening returns once more to night, each part blending into the next without interruption. The city around him shifts in small ways, yet these changes are gradual, almost imperceptible when observed from within the rhythm of daily life. The same streets are walked, the same tools are handled, the same rooftop receives him night after night. And in this steady repetition, the passing of years becomes something that is felt only in reflection, not in the moment itself. The seasons move across Cairo with a gentleness that mirrors the astronomer's own routine, bringing subtle changes rather than dramatic contrasts. The heat of summer settles into the stone and lingers long into the night, making the air feel heavier, though never unbearable. In these warmer months, the rooftop holds the memory of the day's warmth, releasing it slowly as the hours pass, creating a quiet continuity between day and night. When cooler seasons arrive, the air becomes lighter, carrying a softness that can be felt in the movement of breath and the touch of wind against the skin. These shifts do not alter his work, but they accompany it, adding a quiet variation to the otherwise steady pattern. The lamp burns the same in all seasons, its flame unchanged by the temperature around it, and the stars continue their slow movements, indifferent to the subtle changes below. The star he has chosen remains a constant presence through these passing seasons, appearing in its expected place with a reliability that requires no confirmation, yet receives it each night. The astronomer's records grow steadily, page after page filling with careful marks that trace its position over time. There is no single moment when the accumulation becomes noticeable, no sudden realization of how much has been recorded. Instead, the pages gather slowly, forming a quiet archive that reflects years of attention, without drawing attention to itself. He does not count the nights in any formal way, nor does he mark the passing of years with emphasis. The work continues as it always has, guided by routine rather than by the awareness of duration. And within this ongoing process, the star remains unchanged in its quiet presence. Occasionally, small interruptions enter the rhythm of his life, though they do not disrupt it, only shift it slightly before it returns to its steady course. A day of wind may carry more dust than usual, settling on the instruments and requiring a gentle cleaning before work can continue. A passing conversation with another scholar may extend longer than expected, adding a brief variation to the pattern of his afternoon. At times, clouds may soften the clarity of the sky, obscuring some stars while leaving others faintly visible. These moments are acknowledged without concern, accepted as part of the natural variation of the world rather than as obstacles. The astronomer adjusts his work with the same calm he applies to all things, allowing the interruption to pass without leaving a lasting mark. And once it has passed, the rhythm resumes, unchanged in its essence. If your thoughts begin to drift more deeply here, it is because the passage of time in this place does not ask to be measured closely, but instead invites a gentle awareness that can rise and fall without effort. The repetition of nights, the steady return of the same actions, and the quiet consistency of the environment create a sense of continuity that does not require attention to detail. There is no need to follow each day as it unfolds, no need to track the progression of seasons with precision. It is enough to feel the flow, to sense that time is moving even as everything appears still. The lamp continues to burn, The parchment continues to fill, and the sky continues to reveal its patterns in the same unhurried way. And within this steady movement, the mind can rest without needing to hold on to any single moment. The city itself reflects this passage of time in subtle ways, its surfaces carrying the marks of years without losing their form or purpose. Stones become smoother in places where hands and feet have passed repeatedly, while other areas remain unchanged, preserving their original texture. Buildings are repaired when needed, though the repairs blend into the existing structure, maintaining a sense of continuity rather than creating contrast. The sounds of the city shift slightly as new voices replace old ones, though the overall tone remains familiar and steady. Markets continue to open and close, homes continue to hold their quiet routines, and the river continues its slow and constant movement. The astronomer moves within this environment without drawing attention, his life woven into the larger fabric of the city. And through it all, the passage of years remains gentle and unforced. On the rooftop, the accumulation of time is visible in the smallest of details, though it does not alter the function of the space. The wooden platform shows slight changes in color, deepened by exposure to sun and air, yet remains firm and level. The instruments carry faint signs of wear, their surfaces touched repeatedly, their edges softened in places where hands have rested. The parchment, once blank and untouched, now forms a growing collection that reflects many nights of observation. The lamp, though simple, has been used so often that its presence feels inseparable from the work itself. These changes do not stand out, but they exist quietly, forming a record of time that does not need to be read explicitly. And in this quiet record, the years gather without drawing attention to their number. The astronomer himself changes in ways that are just as subtle, his movements shaped gradually by the repetition of his work and the passage of time. His hands, accustomed to the feel of instruments and the motion of writing, move with an ease that requires no conscious effort. His posture adjusts slightly over the years, not as a sign of strain, but as a natural response to long periods of stillness. His gaze remains steady, trained by countless nights of observation, able to return to the same point in the sky without hesitation. There is no moment when these changes become apparent, no clear boundary between what was and what is. Instead, they unfold slowly, becoming part of the continuity of his life. And through these changes, his work continues without interruption. The star remains, as it has always been, a quiet anchor within this passage of time, its presence unchanged by the years that gather around it. The astronomer continues to record its position, each mark of ink joining those that came before, forming a pattern that extends beyond any single page. There is no need to question its consistency, no need to seek an explanation for its steadiness. It exists as it is, and that is enough for the work to continue. The night receives him as it always has. The rooftop holds its quiet space, and the lamp burns with the same steady flame. If you're still here, listening, you may feel the softness of this continuity settling around you, like a gentle weight that asks nothing in return. And as another night passes into the next, the years continue to move, not in leaps or measures, but like sand, quiet and unhurried, finding their place without sound. Capítulo 7. The astronomer does not live in isolation, though his work often unfolds in solitude, and around him move other lives that intersect gently with his own. These connections are not dramatic or demanding, but instead form a quiet network of familiar faces in brief exchanges that accompany the passing days. In the mornings, as he walks through the narrow streets, he passes a baker who arranges flat rounds of bread upon a wooden board, their surfaces still warm from the oven. The baker nods in recognition, not expecting conversation, yet offering a small acknowledgement that is returned in kind. There is comfort in this repetition, in seeing the same gestures performed in the same place, day after day. Neither man pauses for long, yet the exchange becomes part of the rhythm they both inhabit. And as the astronomer continues on his way, the scent of bread lingers briefly before fading into the air of the street. At times, a young assistant joins him in the space where he keeps his instruments, not as a constant presence, but as someone who comes and goes with a quiet purpose. The assistant's role is simple, involving the preparation of materials and the occasional adjustment of tools, tasks that require attention but not urgency. He moves carefully, aware of the importance of the objects around him, though not yet fully understanding the depth of the work they support. The astronomer offers guidance in a measured way, speaking softly and without excess, allowing the assistant to learn through observation as much as through instruction. Their conversations are brief, often centered on practical matters, yet they carry a tone of patience that reflects the work itself. There is no pressure placed upon the assistant to master everything at once, only the expectation that he will return, again and again, to the same tasks. And in this repetition, a quiet understanding begins to form between them. Occasionally, a scholar from another part of the city visits, bringing with him questions or observations that extend beyond the astronomer's usual routine. These visits are not frequent, and when they occur, they unfold without ceremony, as two individuals sit together in a space shaped by quiet thought. Manuscripts may be unrolled, their surfaces revealing lines of writing that have been prepared elsewhere, carrying ideas that travel slowly from one mind to another. The discussion moves at a measured pace, allowing each point to be considered without haste, leaving space between words for reflection. There is no sense of debate or urgency, only a shared interest in understanding that does not require immediate resolution. When the visit ends, it does so naturally, without a defined conclusion, as the scholar gathers his materials and departs. And the room returns to its usual stillness, holding only the faint memory of voices that have already softened into silence. In the marketplace, though he does not linger long, the astronomer becomes part of a wider pattern of quiet interactions that shape the daily life of the city. A merchant who sells ink and parchment recognizes him and prepares the materials he knows will be needed, placing them aside without needing to be asked. The exchange is simple, marked by a few words and the passing of goods, yet it carries a sense of familiarity that has grown over time. The merchant does not inquire deeply into the purpose of the materials, nor does the astronomer explain, as both understand that the transaction itself is enough. Nearby, others move through their own routines, selecting items, speaking softly, continuing the flow of the market without interruption. The sounds blend together into a low and steady murmur, never rising above the level of calm. And within this environment, the astronomer takes what he needs and moves on, his presence neither prominent nor unnoticed. If your thoughts begin to drift among these quiet lives, it is because they do not demand attention, but instead offer a gentle background that supports the main thread of the story. Each person moves within their own rhythm, yet these rhythms overlap in ways that create a shared sense of continuity. There is no need to remember each face or each exchange, only to feel the presence of a community that exists without urgency. The voices remain soft, the movements unhurried, and the interactions brief, yet complete. The city continues to breathe in this steady way, its life unfolding through countless small actions that rarely draw notice. And within this quiet network, the astronomer moves with ease, never separate, yet never fully drawn into its center. At times, in the late afternoon, he pauses at a small courtyard where water is drawn from a well, its surface reflecting the light in a way that changes gently throughout the day. Here, he may encounter an older man who tends to the space, ensuring that the mechanism remains in working order and that the area stays clean. Their conversations are sparse, often limited to simple observations about the weather or the condition of the city, yet they carry a tone of calm familiarity. The older man speaks slowly, his words spaced with the same care that defines his movements, as though each one has been considered before being offered. The astronomer listens without interruption, not seeking to respond with equal length, but acknowledging what has been said. There is no need for deeper exchange, no expectation of continued dialogue beyond the moment. And when they part, it is done without formality, each returning to his own routine as naturally as breathing. The assistant, over time, becomes more familiar with the rooftop and the instruments, though his presence there remains occasional rather than constant. On certain evenings, he accompanies the astronomer upward, carrying small items and observing the arrangement of tools with quiet curiosity. He watches as the instruments are aligned, as the parchment is prepared, and as the observations begin, though he does not interrupt the process with questions. His role is to observe, to absorb the rhythm of the work without altering it, to become accustomed to the pace that defines it. The astronomer allows this presence without comment, understanding that learning often unfolds in silence. The assistant's gaze moves between the tools and the sky, gradually forming connections that do not yet require words. And when the evening ends, he departs with the same quiet care, leaving the astronomer once again alone with the night. Even those who do not interact directly with the astronomer become part of the environment in which he lives, their routines forming a backdrop that remains consistent over time. A woman who sweeps the same section of street each morning, her movements steady and unhurried, creates a rhythm that repeats day after day. A group of children who pass through a nearby alley, their voices soft and brief, add a layer of sound that fades as quickly as it appears. These lives do not intersect with his in any direct way, yet they contribute to the sense of continuity that surrounds him. The city is not defined by a single path, but by the many paths that run alongside one another, occasionally crossing, often remaining parallel. And within this arrangement, the astronomer's life finds its place without needing to stand apart. As the days continue, these small connections remain unchanged, offering a quiet stability that mirrors the constancy of the star he observes each night. The faces remain familiar, the exchanges consistent, and the patterns of interaction repeat without variation. There is no moment when these relationships deepen dramatically, no sudden shift that alters there. Instead, they persist in the same gentle form, contributing to a sense of calm that extends beyond any single interaction. The astronomer moves through this network without disruption, his work continuing alongside the lives of others who follow their own paths. If you are still here, listening, you may feel the softness of these connections settling around you, like a quiet presence that asks nothing in return. And as evening approaches once more, the city prepares itself for night, while the astronomer returns to the rooftop, carrying with him the quiet traces of the lives that surround him. Capítulo 8. There is a quiet comfort in returning to the same place each night, in lifting the gaze to a sky that feels both vast and familiar, and finding within it a point that has not shifted beyond recognition. The star the astronomer observes does not call attention to itself, yet it holds its place with a steadiness that becomes more noticeable through repetition. It is not remarkable in isolation, but over time, its constancy begins to carry a quiet weight. Not as something extraordinary, but as something dependable. Each night, as the instruments are aligned and the parchment is prepared, his attention returns to that same position without hesitation. There is no need to search for it, no uncertainty in its location, only the calm assurance that it will be there. And in this repeated recognition, the star becomes less an object of study and more a presence that accompanies his work. The act of observing it does not change, yet the meaning of the act deepens in ways that are not immediately apparent. What begins as a simple record of position gradually becomes a thread that runs through years of careful attention, connecting one night to the next. The astronomer does not pause to reflect on this connection in any formal way, but it exists within his routine, shaping it quietly from within. The lines of ink that mark the star's place accumulate, forming a pattern that grows slowly across the pages. Each mark is similar to the last, yet not identical, capturing the subtle movement that unfolds over time. There is no moment when the pattern reveals itself fully, no point at which it becomes complete, only a continuous unfolding that extends beyond any single observation. And through this unfolding, the star remains unchanged in its quiet presence. He begins to recognize the star not only by its position, but by its relationship to the surrounding points of light, forming a quiet network of reference that guides his attention without effort. These relationships are not fixed in a rigid sense, but shift gently as the sky moves, requiring a steady awareness that adapts without strain. The instruments assist in this process, offering a framework that supports his perception, yet it is his familiarity that allows him to move with ease. He adjusts the alignment with small, deliberate motions, bringing the star into view with a precision that feels natural rather than forced. The act of looking becomes less about finding and more about confirming, less about discovery and more about presence. And in this presence, the boundary between observer and observed softens, creating a quiet continuity between the two. The star itself does not reveal any change that would draw attention, remaining consistent in brightness and position within the patterns he has come to know. It does not flicker more than others, nor does it fade, holding its place with a calm that mirrors the astronomer's own steady routine. There is no sense that it is waiting to be understood, no indication that it holds a secret beyond what is already visible. Instead, it exists as it is, offering the same appearance night after night, inviting observation without requiring interpretation. The astronomer does not impose meaning upon it, allowing it to remain what it is within the sky. His work continues not as an attempt to uncover something hidden, but as a way of maintaining a record of what is consistently present. And in this consistency, the star becomes a quiet anchor within the larger field of the night. If your thoughts begin to settle more deeply here, it is because the repetition of this relationship creates a calm that does not ask to be examined closely. The return to the same point, the same action, the same quiet recognition allows the mind to rest within a pattern that does not change abruptly. There is no need to follow each observation, no need to track the exact placement of every mark on the page. It is enough to feel the continuity, the gentle persistence of attention that returns without effort. The lamp continues to burn with the same steady flame. The rooftop remains unchanged, and the sky unfolds in its familiar way. And within this setting, the star holds its place, neither demanding nor withdrawing, simply present. Over time, the astronomer's awareness of the star becomes so integrated into his routine that it no longer feels like a separate task, but rather a natural extension of his observation of the sky as a whole. He does not think of it as something he must remember to observe, but as something that is already included in his gaze. The act of recording its position becomes as familiar as the motion of his hand across the parchment, requiring no conscious effort to begin. The pages continue to fill, each one carrying the quiet imprint of the star's presence, forming a record that extends beyond immediate perception. There is no sense of accumulation as a burden, only as a continuation that unfolds naturally. And within this unfolding, the star remains constant, unchanged by the years that gather around it. Occasionally, his attention lingers slightly longer on the star, not out of concern or curiosity, but as a natural pause within the flow of observation. In these moments, the surrounding sky fades slightly into the background, not disappearing, but becoming less prominent as his focus narrows gently. The star does not respond to this attention, nor does it change in any visible way, remaining as it has always been. These pauses are brief, lasting only as long as they need to, before his gaze moves on to other points and patterns. There is no need to hold on to them, no need to interpret them as significant, only to allow them to occur as part of the broader rhythm. And as they pass, the continuity of the work remains undisturbed. The rooftop, the instruments, the parchment, and the star all exist within a quiet balance that does not shift dramatically, each element supporting the others without drawing attention to itself. The astronomer moves within this balance with ease, his actions guided by familiarity rather than by intention. The night continues to unfold in the same steady way, offering the same patterns, the same quiet presence, the same opportunity for observation. The city below rests in its own rhythm, distant yet connected, forming a background that remains constant. If you are still here, listening, you may feel the stillness of this moment extending gently, without pressure or expectation. And as the astronomer records another line of ink, the star remains where it has always been, a quiet point of light that continues, night after night, to stay the same. Capítulo 9. The manuscripts that gather around the astronomer are not arranged as a grand library, but as a quiet collection of records that have accumulated slowly over many years. Each sheet of parchment carries its own texture, some slightly rougher from age, others still smooth from careful preparation. The ink upon them has settled into the surface, no longer wet or fresh, but fixed in a way that suggests permanence without claiming it absolutely. Dust rests lightly on the edges, not as neglect, but as a natural companion to objects that have been left undisturbed for long periods. There is no urgency to organize them completely, no need to bind them into a single volume, only the quiet understanding that they exist as a record of what has been observed. And within this collection, memory takes a physical form, preserved in the same careful way that the star is preserved in the sky. The act of preparing parchment is itself a quiet ritual, one that unfolds slowly and requires patience at every step. The material is first smoothed by hand, its surface made even through gentle pressure, removing any bumps that might interfere with the flow of ink. When the surface is ready, it is placed flat upon a surface, weighted at the corners to keep it from shifting as work begins. The ink is mixed with care, its consistency tested repeatedly until it reaches the right balance between fluidity and thickness. There is no rush in this process, as the quality of the writing depends on the preparation that precedes it. Once the pen touches the surface, the motion is steady, each mark placed with attention that does not waver. And as the ink dries, the words become part of the page, joining the many others that have come before. The smell of old paper lingers in the space where these manuscripts are kept, a scent that is both subtle and enduring, carrying with it the memory of many hours spent in quiet work. It is not a strong odor, but one that can be noticed when the air is still, rising gently from the stacked pages. There is something familiar about it, something that suggests continuity, as if the paper itself holds the imprint of the hands that have touched it. The scent mixes with the faint smell of ink, creating an atmosphere that feels both ancient and present at the same time. It does not demand attention, but it remains noticeable to those who spend time in the space. And in this quiet presence, the work of recording feels like part of a longer tradition that extends beyond any single life. If your thoughts begin to drift toward these details, it is because they do not require intense focus, but instead invite a gentle awareness that can move slowly from one element to the next. The texture of the paper, the color of the ink, the way dust settles on the edges, these are not dramatic features, but they contribute to the sense of place. There is no need to examine each manuscript closely, no need to read every line that has been written. It is enough to sense the accumulation, the quiet gathering of records that speak of time passing without urgency. The lamp continues to burn with the same steady flame, the air remains calm, and the manuscripts rest in their place. And within this stillness, the mind can move through these details without needing to hold on to any single one. The astronomer does not revisit all of his records often, but when he does, there is a sense of continuity that connects the present moment to those that have passed. He moves through the pages with a familiarity that does not require recent review, as the patterns he created remain recognizable even after long periods. The ink has not faded significantly, the parchment has not deteriorated, and the records remain legible in a way that suggests care in their preservation. He does not read them as a story unfolds, but allows his gaze to move across them, noting the consistency of the observations without needing to interpret them fully. There is no moment when the past becomes distant, only a quiet sense that time has been captured in a form that can be returned to. And in this return, the continuity of his work is reaffirmed without effort. The preservation of these records is not achieved through grand measures, but through quiet practices that have been maintained over time. Parchments are stored flat when possible, avoiding the stress that folding might place upon them. When they must be rolled, they are done so gently, with care taken to avoid creasing or damaging the surface. The ink is chosen not only for its clarity, but for its ability to remain stable over long periods, resisting fading as much as possible. Dust is brushed away occasionally, not with force, but with a light motion that does not disturb the writing beneath. These actions are performed without ceremony, as part of the routine that maintains the space. And through this maintenance, the records continue to exist, holding their place within the quiet accumulation of years. Occasionally, the astronomer compares past records with current observations, not to find error, but to confirm the continuity of what has been seen. The comparisons are made with patience, allowing the eye to move between pages without haste, noting the similarities and the subtle differences that time has introduced. There is no need to force a conclusion, no pressure to explain every variation, only a quiet acknowledgement of what has been recorded. The star appears again and again across the pages, its position marked with consistency that speaks of steady attention. The act of comparison does not reveal anything dramatic, but it does reinforce the sense that the work has maintained its thread through the passing years. And in this reinforcement, the value of the records becomes clear without needing to be stated. As the night deepens and the hours pass without urgency, the presence of these manuscripts becomes more noticeable, forming a quiet backdrop to the act of observation. They rest nearby, within reach, but not requiring attention, existing as part of the environment that supports the astronomer's work. The lamp illuminates them gently, casting soft shadows that shift slightly as the flame moves. If you are still here, listening, you may feel the weight of this quiet presence settling around you, like a gentle reminder that some things endure without demanding to be noticed. There is no need to hold on to every detail, no need to track each page or each line of writing. It is enough to sense the continuity, the steady accumulation of records that speak of time passing quietly. And as another night unfolds, the manuscripts remain, holding their place within the quiet space where dust, paper, and memory exist together. Capítulo 10. The change does not arrive with announcement or disturbance, but instead unfolds gradually, like a shift in the quality of light that is noticed only after it has already taken place. For many years, the star has held its position with a consistency that felt almost absolute, returning each night to the same place within the pattern of the sky. It has been observed, recorded, and acknowledged without question, becoming a quiet anchor within the astronomer's routine. Yet one evening, as the instruments are aligned and the gaze lifts toward the familiar position, something feels slightly different, though nothing has shifted dramatically. The star is still there, yet its presence seems less certain, as though it has moved just beyond the edge of what can be clearly seen. There is no alarm in this perception, only a quiet awareness that something has begun to change. The astronomer does not react with urgency, but instead allows his attention to settle more deeply on the star, observing it with a patience that has been refined through years of practice. He adjusts the instruments with the same careful motion, bringing the star into view with a precision that does not waver. Yet even as the alignment is complete, the star does not appear quite as it has before. Its brightness seems slightly diminished, not in a way that is immediately measurable, but in a way that can be felt through repeated observation. There is no sudden dimming, no dramatic fading, only a subtle shift that has accumulated over time, without being noticed until now. The parchment remains ready, yet the hand hesitates briefly before marking the position, as if the act of recording requires a moment of adjustment. And in this pause, the change becomes more real, not as a shock, but as something that has been present all along. Night after night, the observation continues, though the astronomer's attention returns to the star with a quiet intensity that differs from the calm consistency of years past. The instruments are aligned with the same care. The parchment is prepared with the same attention, yet the star remains slightly different from what it was. The change is not dramatic, but it is consistent, appearing again and again with a quiet persistence that cannot be ignored. There is no need to explain it immediately, no pressure to understand what is happening, only the steady act of recording what is seen. The lines of ink that mark the position are placed with care, though they carry a subtle weight that they did not have before. Each entry becomes a quiet acknowledgement that something has shifted, even if the of that shift is not yet clear. And in this accumulation, the change begins to take shape within the records. The surrounding stars remain unchanged, holding their positions with the same steadiness that has always defined them. They do not dim or shift, continuing their quiet patterns without reflecting the variation that has appeared in the star being observed. This contrast makes the change more noticeable, not because it stands out dramatically, but because it exists within a field that remains constant. The astronomer does not turn his attention away from the surrounding points, but their presence serves as a quiet reference that highlights the difference. There is no sense that the entire sky is changing, only that this particular point has begun to move in a way that differs from what has been known. The instruments continue to assist, offering a framework that supports perception without forcing interpretation. And within this framework, the change becomes something that can be observed without being amplified. If your thoughts begin to settle more deeply here, it is because the change does not demand attention, but instead invites a gentle awareness that can move slowly through the details. There is no urgency to understand what is happening, no need to seek an explanation that would resolve the uncertainty. It is enough to notice the shift, to feel the quiet presence of something that is different, without needing to define it. The lamp continues to burn with the same steady flame. The rooftop remains unchanged, and the sky unfolds in its familiar way. And within this setting, the change becomes part of the landscape, not as a disruption, but as a subtle variation that exists alongside the constancy. The mind can rest within this awareness without needing to hold on to any single conclusion. As the days pass, the astronomer continues to observe the star with the same steady routine, though the quiet shift remains present in each observation. The records grow with each night, carrying the marks that document the gradual change without interpreting it. There is no moment when the transformation becomes complete, no point at which the star appears entirely different from what it was. Instead, the change unfolds slowly, appearing in small variations that accumulate over time. The brightness continues to diminish slightly, not in a way that would be noticed in a single night, but in a way that becomes apparent through repetition. The position remains largely the same, yet there is a subtle movement that suggests something has shifted within the pattern. And in this slow unfolding, the astronomer continues to record, maintaining the rhythm of his work without allowing uncertainty to disrupt it. Occasionally, his gaze lingers slightly longer on the star, not out of concern, but as a natural pause that allows the observation to settle more deeply. In these moments, the surrounding sky fades gently into the background, not disappearing, but becoming less prominent as his focus narrows. The star does not respond to this attention, nor does it change in any sudden way, remaining consistent in its gradual shift. These pauses are brief, lasting only as long as they need to, before his gaze moves on to other points and patterns. There is no need to hold on to them, no need to interpret them as significant, only to allow them to occur as part of the broader rhythm. And as they pass, the continuity of the work remains undisturbed. The night deepens without urgency, and the hours pass in the same steady way that has defined so many nights before. The city below rests in its own rhythm, distant, yet connected, forming a background that remains constant. The lamp continues to burn with the same even flame, its light unchanged by the subtle shift that has been observed. If you are still here, listening, you may feel the quiet presence of this change settling around you, not as something alarming, but as something that has unfolded naturally over time. There is no need to seek resolution, no need to understand what will happen next. It is enough to sense the continuity, the steady observation that continues even as the star changes. And as another night unfolds, the astronomer remains on the rooftop, his attention returning to the star with the same quiet dedication that has defined his work for so many years. Capítulo 11. The night arrives without any indication that it will be different from those that have come before, settling over Cairo with the same quiet gradualness that has defined so many evenings. The air cools in the same familiar way. The lamps are lit with the same steady motion, and the astronomer takes his place on the rooftop as he has done for nearly 30 years. The instruments are aligned with the same care. The parchment is prepared with the same attention, and the gaze lifts toward the sky with the same quiet expectation. There is no sense that anything has changed, No anticipation that what follows will be different from the routine that has been maintained for so long. The city below continues its slow fading into rest, and the sky unfolds in its familiar pattern, offering the same points of light that have been observed countless times before. When the attention returns to the position where the star has always been, there is no immediate alarm, only a quiet pause as the eye searches for what should be there. The space is not dark in any absolute sense, as the surrounding sky remains filled with other points of light, each holding its place with the same steadiness as always. Yet where the star should be, there is nothing, only the continuation of the sky without that particular point of reference. The absence is not dramatic, not a sudden darkness that obscures everything, but a quiet gap that feels noticeable precisely because it is so small. The astronomer does not move quickly, does not adjust the instruments with urgency, but allows his gaze to settle on the empty space, letting the observation complete itself without forcing it. And in this stillness, the absence becomes clear, not as a shock, but as something that has simply arrived. The night continues without interruption. The lamp burns with the same steady flame, and the instruments remain in place. Yet something has shifted in the quiet relationship that has been maintained for so many years. The astronomer does not mark the position on the parchment, as there is nothing to record, no point of light to place within the pattern. The hand that has held the pen so steadily for decades rests lightly upon the surface, the ink remaining undisturbed as the moment extends without resolution. There is no need to fill the space with speculation, no pressure to understand what has happened, only the quiet acknowledgement that the star is no longer there. The surrounding stars continue their slow movement, unchanged by the absence, offering no indication that anything unusual has occurred. And in this continuation, the silence around the empty space becomes more noticeable. If your thoughts begin to drift here, it is because the absence does not demand attention, but instead invites a gentle awareness that can move slowly through the details. There is no need to seek an explanation immediately, no urgency to understand what happened to the star. It is enough to notice the absence, to feel the quiet gap in the pattern without needing to define it. The lamp continues to burn with the same steady flame, the rooftop remains unchanged, and the sky unfolds in its familiar way despite the missing point. And within this setting, the absence becomes part of the landscape, not as a disruption, but as a subtle variation that exists alongside the constancy. The mind can rest within this awareness without needing to hold on to any single conclusion. As the night deepens, the astronomer remains on the rooftop, his gaze returning occasionally to the empty space, not out of expectation, but as a quiet acknowledgement of what has changed. The instruments are not moved, the parchment remains blank at that particular entry, and the routine continues without the mark that has been placed so consistently for so long. There is no moment when the absence becomes less noticeable, no point at which the star returns to its place. Instead, the empty space remains, a quiet gap that has appeared within a pattern that was once complete. The records that have been kept for nearly 30 years carry the marks of the star's presence, yet this night offers no such mark, only the silence of an unrecorded observation. And in this silence, the absence becomes more real, not as something sudden, but as something that has simply arrived. The surrounding sky continues to unfold in its familiar way, the other stars holding their positions with the same steadiness that has always defined them. They do not shift to fill the gap, nor do they dim or change in response to the absence. The pattern remains largely unchanged, with only that single point missing, creating a quiet contrast that is noticeable precisely because it is so small. The astronomer does not turn his attention away from the rest of the sky, but the empty space remains present in his awareness, a quiet reminder that something has shifted. The instruments continue to assist, offering a framework that supports perception without forcing interpretation. And within this framework, the absence becomes something that can be observed without being amplified. Occasionally, his gaze lingers slightly longer on the empty space, not out of hope that the star might return, but as a natural pause that allows the observation to settle more deeply. In these moments, the surrounding sky fades gently into the background, not disappearing, but becoming less prominent as his focus narrows. The space does not respond to this attention, nor does it change in any way, remaining consistent in its absence. These pauses are brief, lasting only as long as they need to, before his gaze moves on to other points and patterns. There is no need to hold on to them, no need to interpret them as significant, only to allow them to occur as part of the broader rhythm. And as they pass, the continuity of the work remains undisturbed, even though the work has changed. The night continues without urgency, and the hours pass in the same steady way that has defined so many nights before. The city below rests in its own rhythm, distant yet connected, forming a background that remains constant. The lamp continues to burn with the same even flame, its light unchanged by the absence that has been observed. If you are still here, listening, you may feel the quiet presence of this absence settling around you, not as something alarming, but as something that has unfolded naturally over time. There is no need to seek resolution, no need to understand what happened. It is enough to sense the continuity, the steady observation that continues even without the star. And as the night unfolds toward morning, the astronomer remains on the rooftop, his attention returning to the empty space with the same quiet dedication that has defined his work for so many years. Capítulo 12. The understanding does not arrive as a sudden revelation, but instead unfolds quietly, like a thought that has been forming slowly over time and finally settles into place without announcement. The astronomer sits on the rooftop as the night deepens, his gaze resting on the empty space where the star has been for nearly 30 years. There is no urgency to explain what has happened, no need to seek an immediate answer that would resolve the uncertainty. Instead, the understanding comes gently, emerging from the quiet accumulation of observations that have been recorded over so many years. The records themselves hold the answer, not in any dramatic way, but in the steady pattern of dimming that has been documented night after night. And in this quiet realization, the absence becomes not a mystery to be solved, but a natural conclusion to a process that has been unfolding all along. The change in the star was not sudden, but gradual, appearing in small variations that accumulated over time, without being noticed until the absence became complete. Each observation carried a slight dimming, so subtle that it could not be perceived in any single night, yet when viewed together, they form a clear pattern. The astronomer does not need to seek outside knowledge to understand what has happened, as the answer lies within the records that have been kept with such steady care. The fatigue of a star, the slow fading of its light, is something that has been witnessed in the quiet consistency of the observations. There is no shock in this understanding, no sense of something extraordinary occurring, only the recognition of a natural process that has reached its conclusion. And in this recognition, the absence becomes part of the story that has been told through so many nights of observation. The surrounding stars continue their slow movement, unchanged by the absence, offering no indication that anything unusual has occurred. They do not dim or shift, continuing their quiet patterns without reflecting the variation that has appeared in the star that was observed. The astronomer does not turn his attention away from them, but their presence serves as a quiet reminder that stars have lives that extend beyond any single observation. Some burn brightly for a time, others fade slowly, and all eventually return to the darkness from which they emerged. There is no tragedy in this cycle, no sense of loss that requires explanation, only the quiet acceptance of a natural process that has been witnessed rather than created. The instruments continue to assist, offering a framework that supports perception without forcing interpretation. And within this framework, the understanding becomes something that can be held without needing to be amplified. If your thoughts begin to settle more deeply here, it is because the understanding does not demand attention, but instead invites a gentle awareness that can move slowly through the details. There is no need to seek additional explanations, no urgency to understand every aspect of what has happened. It is enough to notice the pattern, to feel the quiet completion of the cycle, without needing to define it. The lamp continues to burn with the same steady flame. The rooftop remains unchanged, and the sky unfolds in its familiar way despite the missing point. And within this setting, the understanding becomes part of the landscape, not as a disruption, but as a natural conclusion that exists alongside the constancy. The mind can rest within this awareness without needing to hold on to any single conclusion. As the night deepens, the astronomer remains on the rooftop, his gaze returning occasionally to the empty space, not out of expectation, but as a quiet acknowledgement of what has been understood. The instruments are not moved. The parchment remains blank at that particular entry, and the routine continues without the mark that has been placed so consistently for so long. There is no moment when the understanding becomes less clear, no point at which the question returns. Instead, the knowledge remains, a quiet certainty that has appeared within a pattern that was once incomplete. The records that have been kept for nearly 30 years carry the marks of the star's presence and its gradual fading, and this night offers the final entry, even though it contains no mark of light. And in this silence, the understanding becomes more real, not as something sudden, but as something that has simply arrived. The work continues, though it has changed in a way that is subtle but noticeable. The astronomer does not abandon the rooftop, nor does he stop the observations that have defined so many years of his life. Instead, the routine continues with the same steady care. The instruments are aligned with the same precision, and the parchment is prepared with the same attention. The empty space remains present in the observation, but it no longer carries the weight of uncertainty that it once did. The understanding has removed the need for speculation, leaving only the quiet acceptance of what has occurred. The surrounding stars continue to offer their patterns, their steadiness unchanged by the absence. And in this continuation, the work finds its new rhythm, one that includes the memory of what has been observed. Occasionally, his gaze lingers slightly longer on the empty space, not out of hope that the star might return, but as a natural pause that allows the understanding to settle more deeply. In these moments, the surrounding sky fades gently into the background, not disappearing, but becoming less prominent as his focus narrows. The space does not respond to this attention, nor does it change in any way, remaining consistent in its absence. These pauses are brief, lasting only as long as they need to, before his gaze moves on to other points and patterns. There is no need to hold on to them, no need to interpret them as significant, only to allow them to occur as part of the broader rhythm. And as they pass, the continuity of the work remains undisturbed, now carrying the understanding that has been quietly achieved. The night continues without urgency, and the hours pass in the same steady way that has defined so many nights before. The city below rests in its own rhythm, distant yet connected, forming a background that remains constant. The lamp continues to burn with the same even flame, its light unchanged by the understanding that has been reached. If you are still here, listening, you may feel the quiet presence of this understanding settling around you, not as something final, but as something that has unfolded naturally over time. There is no need to seek further resolution, no need to understand what will happen next. It is enough to sense the continuity, the steady observation that continues even with the understanding. And as the night unfolds toward morning, the astronomer remains on the rooftop, his attention returning to the sky with the same quiet dedication that has defined his work for so many years. Capítulo 13. The years continue to unfold after the night without the star, moving with the same quiet consistency that has always defined the passage of time in the life of the astronomer. The routine on the rooftop remains largely unchanged, though there is a subtle shift in the way the observations are conducted, as if the work has absorbed the memory of what has been witnessed. The instruments are still aligned with care, the parchment is still prepared with attention, and the gaze still lifts toward the sky with the same steady expectation. The empty space where the star once was remains present in the observation, yet it no longer carries the weight of uncertainty that it once did. The understanding that has been reached allows the work to continue without the need for speculation or search. And in this continuation, the years pass gently, each one adding its share of quiet records to the growing collection. The astronomer himself moves through these years with a quiet acceptance of the changes that have come, not as disruptions, but as natural parts of a life that has been lived in steady observation. His steps remain measured, though they have slowed slightly, not from strain, but from the natural rhythm of time passing. His hands still move with precision when handling the instruments, yet there is a gentleness in their touch that has deepened over the years. The posture that has been maintained through so many nights of sitting remains steady, though it carries a quiet weight that speaks of long hours spent in the same position. There is no moment when these changes become dramatic, no point at which they stand out from the continuity of the work. Instead, they unfold slowly, becoming part of the pattern that has been established over nearly 30 years of observation. And in this unfolding, the work continues without interruption. The records grow steadily, each night adding its quiet mark to the pages that have accumulated over so many years. The star that was observed is no longer recorded, yet its presence remains within the pages that carry its history. The entries continue to be made with the same care, the same measured motion, as though the work has not changed even though it has. The surrounding stars are still noted, their positions marked with the same precision that has defined the observations for so long. There is no sense that the work has lost its purpose, no indication that the absence diminishes the value of what has been recorded. Instead, the records become a testament to the quiet dedication that has been maintained through so many nights. And within this continuity, the work finds its meaning not in what has been lost, but in what has been kept. If your thoughts begin to drift here, it is because the passage of time in this place does not ask to be measured closely, but instead invites a gentle awareness that can rise and fall without effort. The repetition of nights, the steady return of the same actions, and the quiet consistency of the environment create a sense of continuity that does not require attention to detail. There is no need to follow each day as it unfolds, no need to track the progression of years with precision. It is enough to feel the flow, to sense that time is moving even as everything appears still. The lamp continues to burn, the parchment continues to fill, and the sky continues to reveal its patterns in the same unhurried way. And within this steady movement, the mind can rest without needing to hold on to any single moment. The city itself continues in its own rhythm, unchanged in its essential character, even as the years pass, and the people within it shift gradually. The streets remain familiar, the sounds remain steady, and the patterns of daily life continue with the same quiet consistency. The astronomer moves within this environment without drawing attention, his life woven into the larger fabric of the city. The baker still arranges bread upon the wooden board, the assistant still visits occasionally, and the marketplace still offers the materials that are needed. These familiar presences remain, offering a quiet stability that supports the work without requiring it to change. And through it all, the passage of years remains gentle and unforced, moving like sand that settles without sound. The rooftop remains unchanged, its worn stone holding the memory of so many nights spent in observation. The wooden platform still supports the instruments, their surfaces carrying the faint signs of long use. The lamp still burns with the same steady flame, its light creating a small circle of clarity within the surrounding darkness. The parchment still rests on the low table, weighted gently by the smooth stone that has kept it in place for so long. These objects have become part of the space, their presence inseparable from the work that has been done here. There is no need to replace them, no urgency to renew them, only the quiet continuation of their use. And in this continuity, the rooftop remains a place where observation unfolds without interruption. Occasionally, the astronomer pauses in his work, not out of fatigue, but as a natural moment of rest that allows the observation to settle more deeply. In these moments, the surrounding sky fades gently into the background, not disappearing, but becoming less prominent as his focus narrows. The empty space where the star once was remains present, yet it no longer carries the weight it once did. These pauses are brief, lasting only as long as they need to, before his gaze returns to the other points and patterns. There is no need to hold on to them, no need to interpret them as significant, only to allow them to occur as part of the broader rhythm. And as they pass, the continuity of the work remains undisturbed, carrying the quiet understanding that has been achieved. As the years continue to pass, the work finds its place within the larger pattern of a life that has been devoted to observation. The astronomer does not seek to complete the work, nor does he expect it to reach a defined end. Instead, the work continues as it always has, guided by routine rather than by the awareness of duration. The night receives him as it always has. The rooftop holds its quiet space, and the lamp burns with the same steady flame. If you are still here, listening, you may feel the softness of this continuity settling around you, like a gentle weight that asks nothing in return. And as another year passes into the next, the work continues, not in leaps or measures, but quietly and unhurriedly, finding its place without sound. The night settles over Cairo with the same quiet gradualness that has defined so many evenings before, bringing with it the coolness of the desert air and the soft fading of the day's warmth. The astronomer takes his place on the rooftop as he has done for nearly 30 years, the worn stone beneath him holding the memory of countless nights spent in observation. The instruments rest beside him, their surfaces dulled by time, yet still precise in their purpose, waiting to be touched into motion with the same careful attention that has always guided his work. The lamp is lit, its flame steady and controlled, offering just enough light to continue the observations, without disturbing the darkness beyond its reach. There is no urgency in the movements, no sense of time pressing forward, only the continuation of a routine that has been repeated so many times it no longer feels like effort. And as the sky unfolds above, the patterns emerge slowly, each star taking its place in the quiet arrangement that has been known for so long. The empty space where the star once was remains present in the observation, yet it no longer carries the weight of mystery or uncertainty that it once did. It has become part of the pattern, a quiet gap that exists alongside the constancy of the other points of light. The astronomer does not turn away from it, nor does he seek to fill it with speculation or search. Instead, he acknowledges it with the same gentle attention that has been given to all the observations that have come before. The surrounding stars continue their slow movement, unchanged by the absence, offering their patterns with the same steadiness that has always defined them. There is no need to explain what has happened, no pressure to understand every aspect of what has occurred. It is enough to observe what is present, to record what can be seen, and to allow the work to continue without interruption. And in this continuation, the sky reveals itself as it always has, vast and quiet and full of light. The records that have been kept over the years rest nearby, their pages filled with the careful marks that trace the positions of stars across time. The star that was observed for nearly 30 years remains within these pages, its presence preserved in the ink that has settled into the parchment. The entries continue to be made with the same care, the same measured motion, as though the work has not changed even though it has. The surrounding stars are still noted, their positions marked with the same precision that has defined the observations for so long. There is no sense that the work has lost its purpose, no indication that the absence diminishes the value of what has been recorded. Instead, the records become a testament to the quiet dedication that has been maintained through so many nights. And within this continuity, the work finds its meaning not in what has been lost, but in what has been kept. If your thoughts begin to drift more deeply here, it is because the night does not ask to be understood closely, but instead invites a gentle awareness that can rise and fall without effort. The repetition of the observations, the steady return of the same actions, and the quiet consistency of the environment create a sense of continuity that does not require attention to detail. There is no need to follow each star as it moves, no need to track the progression of the sky with precision. It is enough to feel the flow, to sense that the night is moving even as everything appears still. The lamp continues to burn, the parchment continues to fill, and the sky continues to reveal its patterns in the same unhurried way. And within this steady movement, the mind can rest without needing to hold on to any single moment. If your eyes are heavy now, that is the right place to be. And the story will continue softly, whether you stay awake or drift into sleep. Time passes in this place not as a sudden change, but as a quiet layering of moments that settle gently into one another. Days give way to nights, and nights return to days, without interruption or urgency, creating a rhythm that feels both endless and complete. The astronomer moves through these cycles with an awareness that is more felt than spoken, a sense that life unfolds best when allowed to follow its natural pace. Even the smallest actions, repeated over years, take on a quiet significance, becoming part of a larger pattern that cannot be easily seen all at once. The city below continues in its own rhythm, unchanged in its essential character, even as the years pass, and the people within it shift gradually. And above it all, the sky remains, changed and unchanged, offering the same quiet invitation night after night. The rooftop remains as it has always been, a quiet space above the city where observation unfolds without interruption. The wooden platform still supports the instruments, their surfaces carrying the faint signs of long use. The lamp still burns with the same steady flame, its light creating a small circle of clarity within the surrounding darkness. The parchment still rests on the low table, weighted gently by the smooth stone that has kept it in place for so long. These objects have become part of the space, their presence inseparable from the work that has been done here. There is no need to replace them, no urgency to renew them, only the quiet continuation of their use. And in this continuity, the rooftop remains a place where the sky can be witnessed without disturbance. As the night deepens and the hours pass without urgency, the astronomer continues his work with the same steady care that has defined so many years. The instruments are aligned with precision, the parchment is prepared with attention, and the gaze lifts toward the sky with quiet expectation. The empty space where the star once was remains present, yet it no longer carries the weight it once did. The surrounding stars continue their slow movement, offering their patterns with the same steadiness that has always defined them. There is no need to seek resolution, no need to understand what will happen next. It is enough to sense the continuity, the steady observation that continues even with the understanding that has been quietly achieved. And as another night unfolds, the astronomer remains on the rooftop, his attention returning to the sky, with the same quiet dedication that has defined his work for so many years. The story reaches its quiet close not with a dramatic ending, but with a gentle closing, as the astronomer rises from his place and begins to gather the instruments. The movements are slow and deliberate, each action performed with the same care that has guided the work throughout. The lamp is lowered, its flame reduced gradually until it becomes a small ember and then fades into darkness. The instruments are placed carefully on the wooden platform, their positions adjusted so they remain stable through the night. The parchment is gathered, its pages turned gently to avoid any disturbance, and set aside for the next evening's work. There is no sense of completion, no indication that the work has ended, only a natural pause that allows the night to continue without interruption. And as the astronomer steps away from the rooftop, the space remains, holding the quiet memory of what has been observed. Time continues to pass, moving gently through the city and the rooftop alike, carrying forward the rhythm that has been established through so many years. The astronomer's life continues in its quiet way, the observations continuing with the same steady care that has always defined them. The records grow, each night adding its share of marks to the pages that have accumulated over so many years. The sky remains unchanged in its presence, offering the same patterns, the same quiet invitation, the same opportunity for observation. There is no need to seek an end to the work, no expectation that it will reach a defined conclusion. Instead, the work continues as it always has, guided by routine rather than by the awareness of duration. And in this continuation, the story finds its quiet close, not with a final moment, but with the steady unfolding of what comes next. Rest now, the candle is low. The story has done its work. The night continues above Cairo. The stars hold their places, and the sky unfolds in its familiar way. The footsteps fade into the distance. The dust settles gently upon the rooftop, and the silence returns to the space where observation has taken place. There is nothing left to seek, nothing left to understand, only the quiet presence of the night itself. And as the final moments pass, The image that remains is simple: a rooftop under the stars, a lamp that has burned low, and a sky that continues, unhurried and endless, carrying forward the quiet rhythm of the night.